अच्छा प्रोडक्ट आजकल सब दे रहे हैं, डिस्काउंट भी आजकल सब दे रहे हैं, कौन दे रहा है जो सस्टेनेबल प्रोडक्ट है?
Yeah.
And I think that has to become a consumer ask, because if they demand, people like us will be forced to do this.
Yeah.
Some out of love and some out of saying, listen, we have to do it. There's no other option to survive. And I think it's high time we do that.
Welcome back for another episode of The Voice of Generation Climate, the voice of Gen Z. Today we have with us one of our lovely brand partners, the co-founder of The Baker's Dozen, Miss Aditi Handa. Aditi, what a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you for having me over here.
So how best would you describe The Baker's Dozen? Because if I have to give a characterization of it, it's yummy baked goods.
Well, that's exactly what the point is. I think Sneh and I wanted to put up the Baker's Dozen. We didn't think too far ahead, but we said, let's just make really the yummiest, tastiest, most honest way of making a bread. And initially, I didn't even want to sell it. I just wanted to give it away, because I just wanted people to have good, honest bread, and that's how it really started.
So
and I think that's what we're about.
Are you co-founder first or head chef first?
I think head chef first, but there are days when listen, I'm comfortable with the product, but I really need other things to fall in place, and then it becomes the co-founder's hat. But I think for me, the way it works is everything is driven from the product. So whether it's a marketing thing we're coming up with, is it a sales technique, is it a product launch, is it even a P&L? It all goes back to the product. The product has to make sense, and there should be no compromising on that. Because the easiest way to get a good P&L is compromise on the product, right? Gross margins improved. So I think always product first.
This is the eternal juggle that goes on between being a maker and a manager, right?
That is very true.
You're a maker first, and I know you sign off your mails also. Happy baking.
Yes.
So you're a maker first and then a manager. And I think that actually shows up in the products that you put together, because it's the first part of the DNA, right? Make great product, high quality product, everything else comes second after that.
100% true. But I think, even at times, if you don't want to think so passionately from the product point of view, and you really want to put on what people say the logical hat or the strategic hat, it makes no sense to make an average quality product, because why would someone buy it? There are enough average quality products out there. So what is it that makes you stand out? So to me, even when, let's say, a salesperson comes and says, okay, if we could compromise and bring the cost down like this, the MRP could be better, he's right. But who's going to buy it?
Yeah.
So it always makes sense from any possible angle to make a good quality product.
So from day one, what are some of the core values that the Baker's Dozen has ingrained and continue to live by? And have any of them changed along the way?
So I think the first core value that we had is that we always wanted to make a good product in-house. We realized very early on that a lot of the products we were making were complex in the sense that there were too many shortcuts one could take to get it done faster. And we didn't want that to happen. And that's easiest monitored when it's in-house. So that was the first thing, that let's just make a really, really good quality product. Till date, whenever we make a product, we don't look at the P&L of it whilst developing it.
Yeah.
So the R&D team has been given a brief that this is the kind of, let's say, chocolate cookie we want. Mm-hmm. These are the flavors, this is the size, this is the texture, etc., etc., etc. No one is telling them at what cost do we want it. And let them have the freedom to develop it exactly how they want to do. And then they get back and saying, listen, this is what we think. Now let us do the costing.
Yeah. Wow.
And I feel when someone designs a product like that, there is very little room for error in it. So that's the first thing we've done from day one, and we've just never compromised on that. Second is, I think, and a lot of brands say this, but for us, our customers teach us. It's not our consultants who teach us. It's not our team who teaches us. It's really our customers who teach us. We started Baker's Dozen in the year 2013 as a pure D2C thing, where we had a physical store and a customer would come and buy a loaf of bread. And 6 months, 8 months into the business, they said, listen, coming to a store is at times too tedious. Can you be available where my grocery basket is?
Yes.
Whether this is a trade store, at that time online was only truly big basket. So that's when we expanded. We went omni-channel. Omni-channel has become such a trendy word now. But this is not something an investor taught us. This is something a customer taught us. So
and
I think it's very important to listen to them. And I think that is something we may have gone up and down in the past 10 years, but it still remains the core. If you're in a dilemma, go to a customer and ask, okay, why are you not buying this? Why do you like this? This is what I want to do. What do you feel about it?
Yes.
So I think
So
these are two
interesting.
things we've never
You,
compromised.
like a lot of companies now, a lot of consumer
Yeah,
companies particularly start online, and then after crossing a particular, revenue
yeah,
threshold, say, okay, I want to go offline now because that's where Indian market really
true.
is.
Yes.
And you started in 2013 offline first, and then
Yeah.
over time discovered, okay, now actually consumers love me because you are a
Yeah,
very consumer loved brand.
yeah.
And then you started reaching more people online as well. So the online offline playbook kind of happened organically for you.
It happened organically because I think the industry was such at that point. When we started the business, for us, it was really important to be profitable from day one because we didn't really have anyone investing into us other than our own money that we were putting in. Offline always makes sense like that. A lot of customer habits then were highly offline. They didn't really truly exist online at that
Yes.
point. So I think it again boils down to see where the customer is buying from and you go where that
Go
is.
where they are. So this is your
Yeah.
10th year in existence now.
Yes.
Happy birthday. Happy
Thank
10th
you.
year. Because doesn't along with these values, what sustainability trend have you seen in the Indian consumer market? And then how have you kind of read it and adopted that into your own value chain?
When we first started in the year 2013, actually in the year 2012, when we were still developing our recipes, uh, I had learned how to bake in New York. And when I came and I was trying to do this in Bombay, and the product was just not coming out the way I was making it in New York. And I remember writing to my chef, and he said, go back to the techniques, change the water, change the hydration, change the temperature. And I told him, can I just import the flour from New York and like make my life easier? And he made a very smart remark. He's like, a chef is only as good as what they are with the local ingredients that you get.
Yeah.
And I think from day one for us, it was very important that you locally source because that's the right thing to do. At that point, I don't think we were thinking of environmental sustainability, but clearly that factors in significantly. It's also the best way to make an affordable product. And I think in the chef universe, this has become very, very important where they look at ingredients and how much the ingredient had to travel to come to your kitchen. And the
Yes.
lesser it travels, the better it is. So I think our first real interaction with the sustainability happened in the year 2012, although I don't think we picked up on it at that point.
Yeah.
We did it from a totally different point of view. Then we continued our business like that for about 6, 7 years. In 2019, we moved our manufacturing from Bombay to Ahmedabad, and we moved from regular paper bags to a plastic packaging. This gave us an extremely long shelf life without having to use preservatives, which brought down our food waste. So if we were at let us say at a company where we were at 40% food waste, this brought down to 20%, which sounds quite nice, but obviously it increased the plastic waste.
Yes.
Again, truly, we were not thinking too much of it at that point. We were only thinking that we want to make a preservative-free product. But I remember a customer writing to me in about February, March 2013. And I think where we've been very lucky when customers talk to us, they don't talk to us saying you are the company and I'm a consumer, and there's no formal interaction. She wrote to me personally saying, listen, I'm really truly disappointed in what you're doing. Your product is great. I get what your motive is, but why are you becoming so plastic heavy when the world is going away from plastic? It doesn't set in with the ethos of what you've been trying to do. And I think that really pinched us. And I think that was the first time we said, okay, let us start moving towards this. At that point, we didn't know any better. So what we said, we read in a few places that if you do waste segregation and better recycling can happen, you are able to give back to the environment. So we started a small initiative at our factory where clearly the most amount of waste is always created at the production site, where we started segregating waste, food and paper and plastic. And there's a lot of casteism that exists in our country where waste segregation, cleaning dump yards is considered a lower level job.
Yes.
But we didn't want it to be like that. So one of my jobs every day in the morning when I would reach the plant at about 7 a.m. is to open all dustbins and see किसने plastic में paper डाल दिया, paper में food डाल दिया. And I used to do the segregation in each different room. And honestly, it wasn't a very messy affair because it's a small quantity, so it's not as horrifying as it sounds. And people started picking up on that. That listen, if she's doing it, why can't I do it? So that was the first. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they soon realized that we have been given 3 different dustbins, so let us just not make a mess of it. And we were actually honestly very proud of what we were doing. 3 months later, I started observing the person who was collecting our garbage. He was mixing everything any which way. And it was really disappointing that we started thinking that we're contributing. We started thinking that this customer complaint that came, we were taking an action to offset it, but clearly it wasn't working. And I think a few years passed by like that, and sometime mid last year, we said enough is enough. I think it's time we start acting on it. And that's when truly we said, okay, let's take an action which will actually contribute and not just make us feel good about things.
That's incredible. So it started off, I think you had the inherent value and awareness intent yourself, but then it was a customer who wrote into you to kind of, be that flint, that fire starter to say, let's take some action. And then you took the challenge on your own self to say, okay, I will go and figure out how to segregate some waste.
True.
And that became a beacon for the rest of your team.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that's a very common pattern, by the way, in the market. It's not really compliance driven or government driven.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And now that we've done enough research on this, we've realized if you do it because of compliances, there are so many shortcuts one can take. And like anything in life, right? There's always room for error, and there's always room where you can cover things up. But if it really comes out from within saying, I am hurting the environment, and I think enough is enough, and I want to start moving towards, then the purpose is totally different. Now we're not doing it to convince someone.
That's exactly what we call generation climate, which is not Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, not age. It's age independent, race independent, gender independent. It's anybody who cares to say, okay, I want to do my little bit.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that all around the world. Right? India also, like lots and lots of people are becoming generation climate. So I think it's one for an individual to subscribe into that worldview and say, okay, I care. But it's also really cool that brands, purpose-driven brands, are now making that a core value. Baker's Dozen has been at it, like you're saying, for a while now.
Yeah.
So 10 years into your history, into your existence as a company, now, like, what is the next big move? Because you're doing a bunch of initiatives now, right? Across waste, water, carbon.
So let me just give you a little bit of a background in this, and where I think for us, this background helps a lot. So about 2 years ago, I was doing an executive management program from IIM Bangalore, and one of the subjects we were studying were a lot of policies and governance. And one of the case study, by the way, it was not a subject that bothered me at all. I didn't want to study it. I was like, किसका क्या फायदा होगा मेरे business में? मेरे को क्यों करना है ये सब? But it's a compulsory subject, so you have to do it, and so on, so on. And we did 2 case studies, both on sustainability, one from Patagonia and one from Nike. And in the Nike case study, what really stood out to me was, in one of the press conferences, they very blatantly went out there and said, by that time, Nike was a big enough brand that we are not sustainable. We are not looking at sustainability for all these years, but it's bothering us now, and we want to start. And a few following press conferences were designed in a way where they would say, listen, we've done something. It's not enough, but we've started. And now the next step, and now the next step. And that really stood in my mind, because what happens is a lot of people who want to take an initiative, whether it's sustainability or anything else, they wait for something big to happen. And I feel let us not bother getting to that stage, even if it's something small you begin. And I think it's important to be humble enough to say that we are starting small. Someday we will be big, but it's better to start small than do nothing at all. And even when we wanted to start the sustainability action at the Baker's Dozen, we did not make a very big project of it. We asked around the company that can we get 2-3 volunteers who will want to take this up as a passion project. We are not making a full-time team. This is not a full-time job, and see how it goes. And we met a lot of people from the industry, and we started falling in love with it. And I think it took us a year to say, okay, we want to do, and to actually make it materialize into something meaningful. We don't know what a 5-year goal is, a 10-year goal is. One of the easiest answers to say is we want to be carbon neutral 5-10 years down the line. We don't know. We've not bothered setting that up. All we know is we've identified what our carbon footprint is. We've identified why our carbon footprint is what it is. We've started taking initiatives in each of them in terms of cost cutting, but cost cutting not in terms of rupees, but cost cutting in terms of your footprint. What can I do with my packaging? What can I do with the gas that I use? What can I do with the fuel that I use to reduce the usage of it, which automatically reduces my carbon footprint? And wherever I'm not being able to reduce, what is our aim this year? Next year, kya hoga? We don't know. We will figure it out. But we feel very strong that if you fall in love with something, you eventually find a way to figure it out. So there's no point making tall promises.
Yeah.
This year, our aim is to be plastic neutral, which basically means all the plastic that goes in our packaging, it should be recycled, and that particular type of plastic. Second is any carbon footprint that happens because of the delivery. That means whether it goes from our factory to the warehouse to the customer, this entire delivery carbon footprint has to be offset for us to be able to claim green deliveries. And obviously that's where Climbs comes in to help us out. Those are the two main pillars. I think what has happened without us really talking about it is when we started talking to a lot of people in the company, a lot of people started saying that, listen, this is my department. If I start working in a different way, people started making wheat plants of promoters in a way where their fuel consumption is lower.
Yeah.
And then they asked, okay, if I do it this way, how much carbon footprint am I reducing? My warehouse manager said, okay, listen, I buy sugar in these plastic bags. If I give the plastic bag back to the vendor and ask him to recycle it and give it to me, or can he give it in a goni which is reusable? How much does it offset?
Wow.
So that started to seep in the company at different places. And I think it will be another 6 months before we truly see the impact. But I think there's a lot of amount of carbon footprint we'll be able to reduce over there.
That's such a cool example of like putting out the bat signal.
Yes.
You know, with
exactly.
Really small enough to do, big enough to matter initiative. That's the core value of ours, by the way. Do something small enough to do, big enough to matter, right? Don't just aim for we'll get to nuclear fusion and then we'll have, clean energy.
Because that doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes a long time and people don't really let you know that from day one.
Exactly. So what is something you can do right now?
Exactly. I totally agree.
That will stack up, and it'll have enough of a ripple effect. And not just in your own life and then your own immediate environment, but even somebody, your family member, your friend, your colleague, whoever, right? So you guys put out a bad signal, and the fact that now people in your own company in different teams are asking, hey, how can I cut? That's the strongest compounding effect and ripple effect ever out there, right?
I'm actually hoping some of them are being able to take this back into their families and start doing things in their own homes. Because where I feel maybe a decade ago there was a debate of whether the environment is getting impacted or not. I don't think that is a debate anymore. It's really very black and white. We can, if nothing else, we can see it in the weather change that we're experiencing.
Everybody's affected.
Everybody. So, when companies do it, it's great. But what I think also matters is if the employees of the company start believing. So we are at a employee at about 400 people. Where even 50% of them start believing and bring this practice into their daily life. Imagine now the impact that is happening, which is not going in your official sustainability report, but it's happening.
Which is just great. Like you don't have to have
exactly.
it. But if it's happening anyway, that's even better than having it.
You feel so good about that.
So in school, we used to have this term that we all learned, NIMBY. Not in my backyard. And I love to now say IMBY, like climate is an IMBY problem, it's in your backyard. And that is the most powerful, motivator to act on stuff. But it shouldn't be out of fear. I think it should be out of, hey, can I do something? Because it's just the more rational thing to do. And then you realize, hey, it was not just rational, it was economical too. Right? It was
exactly
good for the environment, good for me, good for everybody around me, right? So I found it very interesting.
Since you brought up this economical point, so when we started working on the gas consumption and the secondary packaging, my supply chain team came and told me that, by the way, because of this initiative, as a company, we are going to save about 50 lakhs this year.
Wow.
And I'm like, great. So that means if you're giving back to environment, you don't need to put in money. You're actually going to earn money.
Earn it back.
And because there are enough people out there who want to only do it for the whole monetary point, I think it makes economic sense to do it too.
It does.
And this is exactly an example of that.
Yeah. So we actually mapped out, the core motivations that come in play when you're thinking about doing something more climate positive. And the first one is obviously just environmental value. You want to do it because you want to feel good environmentally. I've done something. The second one is social value. You want to do it to look good to others, right? And that's also okay. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Yeah, whether you're doing it for vanity, whether you're doing it for like clout, It's okay. Brands do it and individuals do it. That's literally like social media now, right? It's a parading.
Exactly.
But then there's the last third one, economic value.
Yeah.
That one, a large, typically is left out because people think stability is more expensive. A lot
It's
of
not.
it's not.
It's
But a
really
lot
not.
of solutions also do a very bad job
Yeah.
communicating that this is more
Exactly.
frugal over a long enough period of time, right?
Yeah.
So I think all combined, environmental, social, economic,
Yeah.
is just that it's going to become a default choice. Whether you have more renewable energy, whether you have more desalinated water, maybe, or like more segregated waste, solutions are going to become more of a default choice. And I think that is so exciting that we're headed into that future. Just
Actually, that's the most exciting because everybody wants to do this as a part of compliance, or everybody wants to do it to feel good. And I remember my finance team saying that, listen, you want to do the sustainability, great, but this is what it's going to cost us. And I said, okay, what if I find a way for this money to get arranged from the current funds we have, and it will not cost you a dime? Because that's the first thing finance says, कि आपने खर्चे बढ़ा दिए, P&L खराब कर दिया, sales नहीं बढ़ी इसके कारण. What was the point, right? And the money came just by saving cost in places we were just wasting it.
I remember actually seeing this, that you found ways to cut down on your costs by practicing more sustainable practices.
Exactly.
And then from the savings, you financed the second level of sustainability initiatives.
Instead, we've saved much more than what we're going to invest in sustainability. So my finance team should tell me thank you now. कि आपने हमारे और पैसे बचाए.
Intangible benefits are, more consumer love, more just environmental good. Like those are not measurable really in a dollar or rupee term.
But like I said, this entire thing came from the customer because the customer was disappointed in us, and that is obviously something that upsets you. Now I feel like going ahead and telling customers that, listen, we're doing this, and this is where I think Crimes comes in, where we want them to become part of it. We are saying, if we pay for it, but you get to choose the project, you automatically, without having to put in the money, you have contributed. If you've contributed here, hopefully it's made you aware that this is important in life. Maybe you will help us put more pressure on us for us to do better. You will put more pressure on yourself, your child, your family to be sustainable in your own daily practices. And I think that bit is very exciting. I don't think we've even realized the magnitude of it right now, honestly.
Yeah, because it should be inclusive. It should be transparent.
It has to be.
It should be transparent, inclusive, fun to do also. But you don't have to put the cost onto the consumer. You can actually just do it and say, okay, this is a gift for you. I was anyways going to do it, but now I can include you. Because on the flip side, we all know companies that claim to do stuff, but actually don't do anything at all. And then they do not include the consumer in it, right? And while it's a good first start, the inclusion of your consumer is a far more like reward, to...
I totally agree.
Spreading the message.
And again, it comes from the point that we wanted to do it not because there's an audit agency is asking us. We want to do it because we really want to do it.
Yes.
And we don't mind saying that whatever we're doing is not enough. There has to be more.
Exactly.
And we also somewhere know that if customers continue demanding this from us, it's going to be so much fun. So
much fun, yeah. And you actually...
But that's where the true fun lies, when you really do it from the passion of it.
Yes. You're doing it anyway, and you just you let people participate in it, right? You're including people in your community and saying, you are now my sustainability officer. I don't need one chief sustainability officer at Baker's Dozen.
Yeah.
I can have 100,000 people who are also my sustainability officers.
Very true.
That is so cool because they may go and tell their family member and say, oh wow, I learned that this forestry project or whatever is happening in my region, right? I didn't even know what that meant, but like now I do.
By the way, I think it's also customer love like that helps you stay more honest.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the biggest challenges we faced at the Baker's Dozen right from day one is we were trying to be too honest for what the world was. There are so many food products out there available today that claim to be, let's say, preservative-free, clean label, have ingredients, but that is not true. Just because, and they're fooling the customer because you don't expect the customer to be that knowledgeable, right? But they claim to put in something, but they're not actually doing that. They're putting in things that are harmful and not writing in the label, and I feel poor customer doesn't realize that. And I think what's happened over a period of time is because we were truly honest and we struggled. The times when we really struggled against our competition, but the customers eventually became our benchmark, and they would say, listen, Aditi, we do not expect this from you. We want you to be honest no matter what, because we've assumed what you're saying is going to be honest.
Yeah.
And when you live under that moral compass, it actually motivates you to do better and better. It helps you
100%.
find more innovative solutions to problems that exist.
It's almost like you've built a social contract with your consumer
Exactly.
where they trust you and you do right by them. And
Exactly.
in that social contract now, environment, preserving the environment is becoming a big.
Exactly. It totally is. If someone was asking me what should customers ask from a company, I said कि अच्छा product आजकल सब दे रहे हैं, डिस्काउंट भी आजकल सब दे रहे हैं, कौन दे रहा है जो sustainable product है?
Yeah.
And I think that has to become a consumer ask, because if they demand, people like us will be forced to do this.
Yeah.
Some out of love and some out of saying, listen, we have to do it. There's no other option to survive. And I think it's high time we do that.
And the paradox here is we will never actually get to zero consumption. It's impossible. Like as
Impossible,
human
yeah.
beings, we are always going to keep
Yeah.
consuming.
Yes.
But the question is, what can you do to consume more sustainably, right? And
Totally agree.
that question,
Yeah.
consumers can ask it, but brands actually have to also take on that challenge to serve it, because that is
Obviously.
not future, present and future of business now, right?
Yeah.
Consumer brands or even enterprises that don't kind of get
Yeah.
on that train, I don't think necessarily have a future. It's a license to do.
I agree. I totally agree. I think one of the big parts of us wanting to do this, because a lot of people ask me that why do you want to do this? I said, यार, हर आदमी की एक personality होती है, एक brand की personality होती है, which has to go beyond an Excel sheet, beyond even some very cliche marketing things that we do. To me, this was adding that personality to my brand.
Yeah.
That if you're picking me, yes, you should pick me because I'm a good product, but I'm also a sustainable product.
Yeah.
And I think that was so important. And honestly, I think starting this narrative 10 years into the journey is already too late. But Abhi, what do you do for the time that's gone? You
It's
can't.
never too late,
You
yeah.
may as well start.
You mentioned Patagonia earlier, and funny
Yeah.
enough, I think it comes up in every third episode on this podcast because
Yeah.
they kind of, over a long enough period of time, really live by those
Yeah.
values of, good for you, good for the planet,
Yeah.
great for the community, and those values have become a really big part of like us learning.
Yeah.
You can build something great. That's the great product. You can build, stuff that humans can actually enjoy.
Yeah.
The values of reuse, repair, right? Like,
Exactly.
repair is a radical act for clothing. Similarly,
Yeah.
for you, it's source local ingredients, right? So that
Yeah.
you're reducing the time spent on food
Yeah.
food moving around. What did you take away from the Patagonia journey that really inspired you? And if not just Patagonia, what other companies have inspired you in your thinking?
I think, see, what happened is, first, where, like I said, when I was studying that subject, I was really just not interested. I was doing it just because it was a compulsory module. But when you realize, at times, it's good to be open to new things because there's always something to learn. Second is, I think what I found very interesting in the Patagonia thing is, even if you're truly business minded, even if you're totally oriented towards profitability, bringing in this narrative is not taking away from the cost. All these companies have built not only great products in terms of the sex appeal of the product, but the sustainability. That means, a lot of times you see ना कि अगर handicrafts होंगे तो boring ही होंगे, trendy ही नहीं होंगे. And I think these brands were killing that myth that you can earn more profit because you're sustainable. You can have a sexier product because you're sustainable. You can actually target a higher TG because you're sustainable. So these myths that exist, that if I'm sustainable, my TAM is reduced, or now I have to do very special marketing, that all is not true. And I think the minute when I started reading these case studies, I was like, oh, listen, this is really exciting. And why the hell are we not doing this at the Baker's Dozen? Because I also feel as an entrepreneur, it is your moral duty because you are now going to influence the 300-400 employees that you have, but the thousands of customers that you have. So your moral compass, whether it was about making a good product or sustainability, is so important. There's no way you can skip on that. And I think that's what really inspired me about companies like this, where the founders took that thing that I'm going to do this, maybe for the moral reason, but my company will realize it's more profitable because of it.
Yeah, it's the value of good, right? As far as
It truly is the value of good, even monetary value of good for everyone out there who doesn't believe it.
Yeah, people, planet, purpose, profit.
Exactly.
Right? All four. I think it's four
Yes.
P's, not just three. And the analogy I make over here is, it's like the people thought doing a mile in a marathon
Yeah.
or sprinting a mile in a marathon
Yeah.
would be impossible under 4 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Till somebody did it.
Yeah.
And then right after it was broken, that record, like a lot of people started
Yeah.
being able to run under the 4 minute
Very
mark.
true.
And
Very
that's
true.
kind of what we are doing with our brands as well now, which
Yeah.
is somebody had to demonstrate that, okay, you can actually build a purposeful brand that's profitable too.
Very
And
true.
then now there's more brands that are saying, okay, it's actually possible to do it. And this is the normal way of doing business.
Instead, I actually want to go to the next level where I'm. And so the other day I was on a flight, and so every time I'm on a flight, I'm thinking, oh God, the amount of carbon footprint this flight is creating, is it really worth it? And so on, so on. And I wonder if there is a way, we incorporate the costing of the product in the product, right? Whether it was the costing of the bananas that we are using or the plastic that we are using. So that matter, we even incorporate the cost of marketing. So if we've hired Amitabh Bachchan, the cost of Amitabh Bachchan goes into the product. That's how everybody does their P&L. I'm wondering why can't we incorporate the cost of sustainability in the product? So
Yeah.
if I have to take a flight and I'm going to pay, let's say, a 5,000 rupee ticket in it, and if it's going to cost each individual, let's say, another 500 rupees to make that flight sustainable, why is that not an added on cost the way tax is added on?
So
I think,
there is a version of it, which is you see your carbon footprint, which is the true cost of the
but that's
product.
optional, right? I don't want it to be optional. I have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
pay
yeah.
tax on everything no matter what,
We'll
right?
get there also. We'll get there also. Today it's optional, like we have this with
Yeah,
Make My Trip
I
in
know.
Yatra. But
Whenever I book my ticket, I book that, but I'm wondering how many people are choosing. And see, none of us choose to pay tax, right? But
yeah,
we
yeah.
have to pay tax because it's a compulsory aspect, whether you
But
buy
you
a
know that
t-shirt
there
or
is
whatever.
something I fully agree with you, but there is something really cool about making things intentional.
Yeah,
So if we it would be great for like how much money would flow into
yeah,
environmental causes if we were to do that. But then there's a missed opportunity of informing people that hey, this was an option that you actually opted into. So I think that's
I
a little bit
agree.
of a behavior shift of saying here's a choice and assuming that
I
people will
wonder,
want to do right.
and you are probably better informed to answer this. If it's optional and we get there, it's much better. But will we get there fast enough to the kind of damage we are creating?
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. I don't know.
Yeah. I fully agree with you. Like for the speed problem, it should just
Yeah,
be default in everything, right? Climate
yeah,
action in every transaction. But for the behavior shift portion of it, which
yeah,
I think it's slower, but it may actually have far more of a compounding ripple effect,
yeah.
right? And maybe that
True.
that that
Very
compounding
true.
ripple effect turns out in the long run or in the next 5, 6, 7 year period to be faster than the
Yeah.
other round.
Hopefully, that's
I
the
don't know.
hope,
Let's see.
right?
Let's see. We're definitely learning our lessons. Um, in the in the spirit of Patagonia and other purposeful brands that you
Yeah,
have learned from and inspired by, one of the key factors that really stands out and it always amazes me
yeah,
is how they started off small and it was easier to live by those
yeah,
values, but as they scaled up and reached a significant volume,
yeah,
global reach, they
yeah,
continued to do right by
yeah,
their values. And I've seen that with the Baker's Dozen too now.
yeah,
Right? You went offline first, and you went offline and
yeah,
online, omni-channel, and somewhere that spirit of like authenticity
yeah,
has remained true. For example, you share your ingredients and your
yeah,
recipes a lot,
yeah.
right? You still do it. So how has that journey been? Authenticity in the spirit of scale.
So I think so to give now a personal background over here. So I, on my mom's side, come from a family of freedom fighters. So when I was a little kid, from my nana, from my BG, I would hear all these stories of how they came together during the freedom struggle, how they gave up school, but they would go on all these morsas because Gandhi ji asked them to. They would actually go to jail and feel really happy that hum jail gaye the. And
Yeah.
I would hear these really inspiring stories as a little kid, which I think is a value system that only exists for that generation. Unfortunately, we've not gotten to experience it where the entire country comes together for one aim that free us from this world that exists. And I think that was always there in me that will I ever get to contribute back to my nation the way my great grandparents did? And I think there's a lot of stories you hear in your childhood and you don't realize the value of it at that point, but they help you make the right decisions in the future because they put that value system. Now, one of my things that my nana used to always say from, and he narrated a few stories, कि झूठ कभी नहीं बोलने का, even if it means backlash only, even if
Yeah.
you will get beaten up for it, even if you will get thrown into a prison, you should never lie. And I think that was something that I always did as a kid. Even if I did something naughty, which obviously all kids do, I never lied. Even if I did something wrong, with my fellow team member, with my husband, I would always say, listen, ये मैंने गलत किया है. It may be wrong, but I'm not ashamed enough to want to hide it. And I think that value system came in when we made products at Baker's Dozen. That if we were going to put maida, we told our customers we are putting maida. We did not, even if regulations allowed us to claim whole wheat, we just did not do, because कई बार लोग बोलते हैं हमने झूठ नहीं बोला, but पूरा सच भी नहीं बताया. It's that misleading thing that happens, right? Yeah. So I think that value system was always there, that let's make whatever we do, we will do it right. Now, a lot of people think that's limited to the kind of product we make, but that also gets translated into the way we treat our people in our offices, whether the way we treat the labor at the plant, and it's not about giving them fair wages. वो तो obvious ही, वो तो हम देने ही वाले हैं. But to me, what was important is when we started this factory in Ahmedabad, that how many of our people we have. At that point, we had 50. Now we have close to about 250 over there. Everybody should do the same job every day. Everybody should know each other's name and not say, "Hey, idhar aao, oh, wo baksa utha." It's just so rude to talk to people like that, right? And I think because we were treating people well, and we were being very honest about everything that was happening, when we had COVID, we had a tornado, we had God knows everything that's happened in the past 3 years. We've not had people leave us in these times of distress. They've stood by us, they've gotten appreciated because of this, and we have survived so much because of them. So I think that honesty was always true. And there are times in the market when you say, listen, there is someone who's competing with me, and I know for a fact as a chef, his product is not as good as what he claims. But should I take that shortcut route? And then you always remember what your Nana said, कि झूठ कभी नहीं बोलने का. Yeah. It may be difficult in the short term, but you have to have faith in your consumers, in the good that exists in the world, in this cosmic energy, that eventually it will work out. Maybe in a day, maybe in a year.
This in a slightly different way that has also left a very powerful impact on me, which is it's easier to do something 100% of the times than to do it 99%.
Yeah.
So
exactly, I totally agree.
If you do it 99% and you left that 1%, that 1% will expand. And then before you know it, will become the normal.
Because also what happens is when we started, it was just me and maybe 10 employees in the company. When you're 400, and at times there are places you can take a shortcut without even me realizing that someone else out there has taken. But if it goes in the DNA of the company, then they say, nahi, this ऐसे नहीं हो सकता. And I think that's very important, because एक बार छूट दे दी ना, किसी को भी, खुद को या किसी और को, you just don't know where it's stopping.
So you've been able to spread that ethos into the DNA of the whole company as it's scaled.
We would like to think we've been able to spread. It's very, very important. I mean, it doesn't always happen, but that is something for me that's most important. Let's be honest with each other about whatever is happening. Let's be honest with our vendors. There have been times when we've not been able to pay our vendors on time, and we say कि हम आपको झूठ नहीं बोलेंगे कि एक हफ्ते के बाद पेमेंट रहेगी. हम बोल रहे हैं एक महीने तक हम नहीं कर पाने वाले हैं.
Yeah.
And where the vendors have always stood by us no matter what, because if we've given them a deadline, we pay by that time. And we're honest. Instead of, saying humne latkaya, these are very common industry practices that happen.
Yes. I agree. I mean, do it 100%.
Yeah.
And then it's just an easier playbook to follow, because then it
is so much easier.
Code. There is no other way. I have to follow my code.
Instead, to that matter, even when we're talking about the carbon footprint, when the plastic recycling topic came up, so one option was to recycle as much plastic as of the products that we sell.
Yeah.
But because we are a manufacturing unit, my first thought process was sales is not truly reflective of what I'm producing. I am producing extra. This stock may be kept at my warehouse, it may be kept at the plant, whatever it may be. So we said if you're going to do it, we may as well do it right. So we said we will recycle as much plastic as we're consuming. Whether this product got wasted and वो plastic waste हुआ, कि उसकी side की trimmings निकली, or whether it was plastic that was made but it was not sold, because you may as well do it right.
Yeah.
It may not impact the claim. The claim may still be the same, but that was anyways not the motivation to do it right.
Good one. And I really subscribe to that belief. Just don't do it just for the optics of it. Do it because it's the right thing to do.
And customers pick up on this. Customers very quickly pick up on this.
100%. I mean, that's the truest form of feedback you can get.
Exactly.
Right? And you really can't, people think they can get away with claims and stuff, but
it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, consumers are the smartest feedback loops out there.
Because they use the product, they realize that, listen, they say this, but we don't get the same experience. So at times, what's the worst? When they don't come to you and complain, they just stop using your product.
Yeah.
And losing a customer like that, it's just not worth the shortcut someone was telling you to take.
I know I've given up on so many brands because they changed
Exactly.
their tactics along the way.
Exactly, that is true.
Um, so the last set of this, which is
Yeah.
different stakeholders in society. Each of us is affected by
Yeah.
climate change now and environmental degradation, and we have a very short window to really
Yeah.
make some amends. So all of us have a part to play. We've talked about consumer brands and particularly the bakers dozen
Yeah.
leading that charge, right? And saying, okay, we will create great product, but we'll also do good right
Yeah.
by the environment. And you talk about consumers and how they have a part to play. About three more stakeholders that I also want to bring up, and if you were to wear their
Yeah.
hat, how would you address it? So the role of an investor to start with. I know you guys have phenomenal partners who also share very strong
Yeah.
values, but
Yes.
overall, whether it's them or investors, what role do they play in our climate action going forward?
Yeah. So over here now, I think a lot of, so like I said, this environmental thing was in our head for a very long time, but sometime Kawaljeet Singh, who's the founding partner in Fireside, and who's been a mentor to us even before they really invested. Whenever we sit down with him to discuss, let's say, the strategy of the brand for the next quarter and so on, somewhere or the other, it always comes in that Aditi, इतनी packaging क्यों कर रहे हो? थोड़ी कम कर दो, थोड़ा environment को कम impact करो. Then they say, what are you doing on sustainability? Now these are, and I think where he's been wonderful is, these are not asks as an investor. These are more concerns he's raised as like a guiding parent or a mentor. And the thing is, when he says something now, whether you believe it or not, you want to do it. You just want to do it because you want to make him happy because he just means so much to you. And I think that little push that we needed to actually do something that goes on our books, that we know is official, happened because not a ask Kawal made, but an advice that he gave or something that he made you aware of. They had conducted a conference in February where different brands were talking about their different USP strategies, what do they like to do. And there were a few brands who were talking about sustainability, and I think that was a game changer for me, saying कि ये topic थोड़ा लंबा खिंच रहा है, 3 महीने हो गए हमने कुछ किया नहीं है, let us quickly wrap this. So I think an investor plays a very, very important role on how you take the shape of the company, and I think Kawal over here contributed significantly, not to the P&L, he's contributed there also, but to the moral shape the company was going to take. And I think more people need to ask that.
Yeah, I've heard this line that I really like too. The relationship between the founder of a company and the investor.
Yeah.
Ideal state is founder is the pilot of the
Yeah.
plane, and a really good investor partner is the air traffic control, right?
Yeah.
Guiding you along the way and just course correcting.
Exactly. And I think that's where the ideologies need to match. I always tell people, पैसे तो कोई भी दे देता है, but if you get an investor where the ideologies match, then the journey is that much faster and better.
Yeah, and Fireside is absolutely
absolutely-
embodied in their values.
they're
and
amazing.
Put out the value of good, right? Painstakingly
Exactly.
put together an entire narrative about what purpose-driven
Exactly.
brands should do and how. If you don't know how to begin, like here's a playbook.
Exactly.
Right? So that's Fireside, but what about the rest? Because the market's full of all kinds of investors. And see, capital is a very good lever to drive
Yeah.
action. So how capital gets deployed influences what happens next.
So I think, see, one of the things I've realized in the past 1 year when you're dealing with investors are highly banking on the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They obviously bring in a world of knowledge and they have their asks, and none of those asks are unreasonable or wrong, or the context they come from, I don't think has ever been incorrect. But everybody is really banking on the entrepreneur doing their job. And I think what the entrepreneur needs to realize is that they need to do the business with what they believe in. If you're doing well, anyone will back you. If you're not doing well, anyone will anyways leave you. So you need to take the onus and saying, okay, this is a decision that my investor may or may not agree. Great, let's have an open conversation, but let's also choose to disagree.
Yes.
And now go ahead with what the entrepreneur feels, because we have to carry the sack of it, right? It is our job to make it a success, and it is our job, if it's a failure, to fix the failure.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding with an investor is very important. And I don't think investors say no to this. They will say, listen, this is what we feel. Now you go ahead and do your magic or not do your magic. But I think once that rhythm is set, I don't think these things stop. Where with Fireside, obviously, we never had to get into this conversation on sustainability because obviously they feel so gung-ho about it. But I don't think people mind it, especially when you can show the value in it. They may not come from a point of passion that you do, which is fair enough. But like I said, in doing value of good is not just कि मैंने customers acquire किए. Value of good is मैंने P&L भी better किया. And let's put that pressure on us. It only makes you better, right?
Absolutely. And I think as a society, we should start respecting capitalism more.
It's totally fine.
Yeah, I don't know why over so many decades we just stopped liking that word. But being profitable is a very good thing.
It is very important to be profitable. And I think what's more important is that, if I have to be able to give back to society, that means I have to put more pressure on my P&L to be profitable to give back to society. If I can give back less, doesn't matter, but you have to give back. It has to be part of the cost infrastructure.
As long as it's not just extractive, but it's
exactly
regenerative or additive, then great.
That is true.
Make all the profit in the world. Right?
अरे companies में बहुत जगहों पे fat होता है to create money for a project like this is really not difficult.
For sure. All right, the last two.
Yeah.
So vendors, not necessarily just bakers dozen vendors, but overall in a supply chain, the vendors of a company, what influence can they have in climate action?
So this is in the pipeline right now. It's not something we've executed, but sometime later this year, what we want to do is we've spoken a lot about sustainability amongst our team. We've started talking about it amongst our customers, but it has not gone to the vendors as yet. Not in a official big way. I mean, छोटी बातें हुई हैं, but nothing major. What we intend to do is get all our vendors together. We want to do we want to celebrate something called the Gratitude Day, which is later this year, where we basically want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for the little things that you've done for us. Thank you for the big things that you've done for us. Because it's not always a monetary transaction that keeps you together, right? There has to be some joy in it too. And what we've decided as part of this Gratitude Day is share with them that this is what we are doing. These are the initiatives that we took, not the recycling ones, but these are the cost-cutting initiatives that we took at the plant, which were also environmental cost-cutting. How can you contribute to this? Or whether, like I said, can the flour come in recycled in bags? So the bag it comes in, can you take the empty bags, refill that and give it to me?
Yeah.
You may want to charge 50 paisa less, great, that's monetary benefit for me. But if that same thing happens, then there's also a carbon benefit. And we feel if we can do that with our vendors, if nothing else for our factory, utna sustainability बढ़ जाएगा. Exactly. But my common sense says if the vendor starts doing it for me, there's no reason they will not do it for someone else.
Exactly. That's the whole fire starter effect. You are the wedge to then drive that change or influence that change in your own vendor base, and then they will start doing it for the other 30 companies that they also supply to.
Exactly. And I feel where we've had, when we stick to a vendor, we stick to them for a lifetime. There's no reason to change. And we've not even changed if we found someone who's a competitive price. We go to our vendor, कि ये price आप match कर सकते हो, great. अगर आप नहीं भी करोगे, we are still going to stick to you because it's a relationship, right? At the end of the day. And I think where we've realized with our vendors, whenever we were asked from them, okay, listen, I need a product, I need my raw material in this regulatory standard, and you must find a way to do it. Not only have they given it to us, but they've benefited because now they've been able to get more customers because of that value add they did. So I'm hoping the same thing will transpire here too.
Yeah, I think it's a really big lever, and supply chains driven by vendors.
Exactly.
Vendors who provide the materials that we all consume.
Very true.
Right? It's like a behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes can actually be much bigger than front of the scenes actually. So usme there's a huge amount of masti that can happen over there.
It's like an iceberg, right? Most of the action can happen over there. So that by the time it gets around to consumers, most of those decisions are already made.
Very true. Very, very true.
Right? The last section of it, which is government. So even though we don't want to go down the push it and drive it with compliance route, government is a huge stakeholder in society and
100%.
So how would you, if you were to wear their hat, what would you do? And what do you think their role is for climate action?
So I think where the beauty of being in the government is you can make changes at a policy level. You have the infrastructure for it, you have the funds for it. You also have the helicopter view of not just in the top but go down to the bottommost level. I think these are advantages the government gets which a private business simply does not get. And they also get to take calls which at times a business cannot, because a business is limited by the stakeholder, the shareholder. Then what you have to do what the shareholder says, right? You have to bring the highest value to the shareholder. The government does not get away with it, but that's the beauty of being there. And like I said, I wonder if there is something like tax which can be a permanent thing, or maybe there are more initiatives of just awareness building that can happen out there. I think that itself will make a very big impact.
Kicked off early enough.
Yeah.
You're saying 10 years is too late, but I think you kicked off in very many smaller ways earlier in your journey too, and now you're really like hitting the ground running because you have multiple sustainability initiatives, which are great for the planet, great for your bottom line, right?
Yes.
And just great for your consumers too. And that really is the whole ethos of purpose-driven brands.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see where this is headed. We are very proud to have partnered with you on this journey as well. And I really hope more consumer brands, even more enterprises, take a lesson from your playbook. Not just 10 years into the journey, but starting with that.
It has to be the starting point. I totally agree. If I were to start a business all over today, this would have to be on the table day one. It should be. There is no reason why you need to delay it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Ani, so much. It's always fun talking to you.
This was great. Thanks a lot.